Everyone should have heard the big news. On the Ukrainian battlefield on New Year's Eve 2023, Russian military held a New Year's Eve party on the battlefield, and was hit by a round of guided missiles launched by Ukraine using HIMARS. According to Russia's statement, Ukraine launched 6 missiles, 2 were intercepted, and 4 hit the target building. According to the Ukrainian side, at least 400 people were killed. Russia's civilian media listed the numbers of these soldiers, and believed that there may be more than 500 deaths. Ukraine fired several rockets during New Year's Eve, and at least eliminated 1 reinforced company, and it is likely that they directly hit a battalion and seriously injured a regiment. The Russian military's invasion of Ukraine is an act of industrial nation's aggression, similar to the United States military's involvement in the Vietnam War. Last autumn, Putin announced the annexation of the territories of 4 eastern Ukrainian states through legislation. In nature, this is completely consistent with the actions of Nazi Germany 80 years ago. Germany's industrial strength was not as strong as the United States during the Cold War, but it also completed industrialization in the early 20th century, and could not avoid the problem of anti-war sentiment among modern citizens. By the 5th year of World War I, Germany occupied large portions of foreign land, on both the eastern and western fronts, while the homeland remained unoccupied by the enemy. But soldiers of both the Navy and Army refused to fight, turning their guns against the government that sent them to the battlefield. Adolf Hitler, himself a veteran of World War I, had witnessed the loss of morale of millions of troops. So in order to launch his aggressive foreign policies, he had to avoid anti-war sentiment problems. The plan of Nazi Germany was simple: using mechanized troops to launch a blitzkrieg, quickly ending the war before anti-war sentiment could develop in society. This approach was effective against most European countries. For example, on May 10, Germany began attacking French troops, and on June 10, France surrendered Paris, and the soldiers didn't have time to react before the war was over. But the same strategy was not very effective when applied to the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union's territory was too large. Losing millions of square kilometers of land still allows them to continue recruiting and filling the front line. Putin, as a Soviet Communist Party member, and a senior spy trained under the Soviet system, must also want to reduce the social resistance to the invasion of Ukraine. Putin's first strategy is to learn from Hitler's blitzkrieg and quickly end the war, without giving soldiers and society time to be discontent. In retrospect, Putin's overall goal in February 2022 was to defeat Ukraine within a week, or at most a month, occupy most of the territory, and ideally use paratroopers to finish in 1 hour and 22 minutes. For this, Putin was willing to pay a huge diplomatic price, sending the strongest armored troops through Belarus to raid Kiev. But Putin did not expect Zelensky's psychological quality to be too strong. Putin failed, and even gave the Ukrainian army heavy equipment for 4 or 5 regiments. Putin's second plan is the stability model of Tsarist Russia before World War I, avoiding mobilization and drafting, relying mainly on a small number of professional soldiers to fight, and hoping that they would tolerate the war environment for the sake of money, also reducing the impact on civilian emotions. Professional soldiers are indeed relatively stable, but the problem is that there are too few of them. And once the raid fails, they have to fight against tens of thousands of anti-invasion troops mobilized by Ukraine. As it turns out, the number of Sergeant, Chechnya civilian armed forces and the Wagner group is not enough, and they are all preparing for the post-war order. So Putin had no choice but to continue to mobilize locally and send civilians to the battlefield. Russian men's first reaction to mobilization is not to enlist voluntarily, but to go abroad. The rich go to Turkey, the poor to Central Asia, and the rest accept drafting. Now, Putin has organized several tens of thousands of unwilling civilians through conscription, interrupting their previously decent modern lives, to deal with a war that has no hope of victory. And Russia will continue to draft. This is not only to increase manpower on the front line, but also to put bombs in their own society. From historical experience, it took less than a year for Nazi Germany to transition into a wartime state, and for bombs to appear around Hitler. Putin is unlikely to achieve victory within a year, so he is starting to learn from the United States during the Vietnam War. where the US at least persisted for 8 years. The American experience is to bring the country's daily life to the battlefield, reducing soldiers' resentment. American military bases abroad often become the most prosperous areas in the local area, such as South Korea and Thailand. However, like the United States, sending ice makers to each frontline unit is costly. Now, although Russia is an industrialized country, it is largely dependent on oil dollars for modern life. Once it cannot sell oil at high prices, maintaining modern life in the country is very difficult, and providing a comfortable environment at the front line is even more difficult. The First World War army of Tsarist Russia only maintained morale for 2.5 years, before turning their guns on Moscow. Following the principle of the lesser of two evils, Putin's generals know that gathering people together poses a risk of being bombarded. But they still try to use the infrastructure of the former Soviet Union as much as possible, to concentrate the frontline soldiers in relatively comfortable heated rooms. They even allow soldiers to drink and party during New Year's to numb their minds. Therefore, Ukrainian rocket launchers only need to use old maps of the former Soviet Union, and target buildings that can accommodate large numbers of new residents. And they are sure to get surprises. The availability of mobile phone signal is also an important factor for the accuracy of Ukrainian rockets. This is also related to modern lifestyle. Now the newly conscripted soldiers in Russia are basically post-2000s. They believe that using smartphones is a basic right, and it is an essential element of modern life. If the smartphones are confiscated, perhaps the Ukrainian shells would not be so accurate. But if these soldiers are left idle and allowed to think about why they are fighting in Ukraine, it is likely to be more detrimental to Putin's regime.